Hello, welcome to the March 21st, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field, or you could email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase or other Steinberg software that you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. If it is also, if you can tell us which version number, so if it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system you're running, that would be helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in real time will soon be eclipsed as more people log in and ask questions. I'll try my best throughout the live stream to get through all of the questions in chronological order. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could refrain from asking the same question over and over again, that would just speed up the whole process. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field that you could review afterwards. So it'll take a few hours. I'll take a quick break for dinner and then work on doing the index. If you wanted to search for indexes that have been done if you want to search for topics that have been done in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that searchable site. There's over 25,000 questions, I think, that you could search on the Cubase Index site. So we want to give special thanks to Jan. We have two people that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really do it to make it a better community. So we want to give a special thanks to Agent K and to Jazz Dude. One other valuable resource of information that's also available is a Cubase Nation Discord. And I thank Jazz Dude for all of his efforts of creating such a wonderful resource and a library of information that's incredibly useful for the Steinberg community. And so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I am the host of the live stream. I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg for Yamaha Corporation of America, and we are the U.S. distributor for Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, where you live. It's always fascinating to see. One quick note, we usually have our Zoom meetup on the last live stream of the month. I will be taking some vacation time in April, so the first week of April. So our last live stream of the month will be March 28th. I'll be on vacation on the 31st, of Friday. And then in April, the meetings may be a bit more sporadic because I have the NAMM show and a corporate kickoff that I need to go to. So just a heads up, we'll try to sneak in some of our live streams when I'm not traveling or involved with the trade show. But I'll make those announcements as the time gets closer. But with that, we will go ahead and begin. Okay, so we see a question from John. How do you synchronize user chord pads, patches, samples between two systems running 12 Pro on a PC and a Mac? All right, so chord pads are just going to show up, and if you wanted to take a quick look, I'm not sure, on the PC side, if we go to, I'll just show you where you could go to find the different settings. Okay, so let's look at our chord pads first. Okay, so I'll just show a quick screenshot of Windows platform. So if you go to like the start menu and where you see to Steinberg Cubase 12 Pro, go to the user settings data folder, and this is where we would be able to find our the chord pads on the Mac platform. That's where you see it on Windows. On the Mac platform, we would go to the Go menu, and at this point, just choose the library. And we would go to, so let's go to, again, to our library. Let me just make sure I have this right. And you may have to just hold down your Alt or Option key to go directly to your library, and you would go to Application Support. And then you would see Steinberg, and here you would see the chord pads presets. So, and then you could manually copy from the chord pads presets from your user settings data folder on Windows, and copy the chord pads presets into this folder. As far as samples, so if you have like all the content, I'm not sure if it's samples that you've created, but that would literally just be moving the content over. If it is going to be all of the samples that we see in Media Bay, as soon as you install them, they will all be carried over in all the presets. And if you wanted to carry over all of your patches and presets and most other settings, we could go to your profile manager, and all of your user presets, you could just simply export a profile and then import it and go back and forth between the two different computers, just like that. Okay, so a question from DDP Music. On Stream Deck, how to program the send effects on and off and level, or on and off on regular Stream Deck. So if you wanted to, so the Stream Deck, you could have it transmit MIDI messages. So if you wanted to have a particular MIDI message, so if we get to like our MIDI remote, we could just come over here. So let's say if we have a particular button and this button is transmitting and you would do this as there's a free MIDI utility, and then you would just simply, you need to hook up probably a loopback for that to work. So once you have that MIDI utility configured, all you would need to do is, and let's go to, let's say our different mapping page here. So now we could just double click on a particular area. We'll go to like our mapping assistant. So you could just come over, and once we you click on the plus sign, you could have this mapped out. I don't have mine currently connected, but you could have your you have the Stream Deck connected, and then from the Stream Deck here, choose your MIDI in and out ports. And once that's done, you could just have each of the buttons. So the 32 buttons, and you could have nested folders with different MIDI buttons. So if you wanted to assign a particular function to a control, so let's say if I wanted to click on this, at this point we could go to the mapping assistant. And if you wanted it to be on selected track, you could just say, okay, let's go to our send slots. And then you could just turn on send slot 1. And then we could just assign different knobs to turn on and off send slot 1. So let's say if I go to this track, once we have this closed, I go to my sends. And let's say I added an effect send here. Okay, and then as soon as I hit the button, we could turn on and off. So just hitting this button that I've defined, that will turn on and off the particular send. So I could have this button do send 2, send 3, send 4, send 5, send 6, 7, 8. Now what the Stream Deck does is generally it just transmits a MIDI note message, or it could transmit a CC value, but it doesn't really have the ability to, that I know of, to send kind of like, to treat it like a fader that would adjust our send level. So you may need to have an object that would just simply have like a fader to adjust to, so you could send like 0 to 127 as opposed to like a note on, note off message. So at this point we could say, okay, I want to go to my send slots, and let's say level for the first fader will apply the mapping. So as I come here, we could now turn on the send and adjust the levels, but probably the Stream Deck isn't the best thing for actually transmitting different levels. Think of it more as just a on-off type of function. All right, so we see, does Cubase have a real-time true peak limiter like the Nugent ISL? I'm not that familiar with Nugent ISL, but I think if we come over here, there's, peak limiters that are included. So even if you wanted to go to the channel strip, you could have like a brick wall limiter that could be included. You could also just run this under dynamics. So if you want to set like your your actual output range and your threshold that you wanted it to work with, you could do that. And I think I'm not that familiar, but if it allows you to do something like set a specific threshold, for different like levels, one of the things that you could do is, let's say if I just do a quick export audio mix down. So I'm just doing this from memory from a long time ago, not that familiar with the plugins. So I'm just going to, but if it's a limiter that, allows you to say, okay, this is minus 14 LUFS for Spotify, that type of thing. So I'll just do a quick export audio mix down here. We'll have it create a file. And then one of the things that you could do in Cubase is if you just go to audio and to processes, and then you could just say normalize. So say I want this to be normalized to minus 14 LUFS so that I know it's going to be kind of the optimum value for the streaming service. You could just normalize the audio file, but you could very easily come over and just have access to the particular limiter as well. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to add a new track with the track preset already selected at once? So when you add a track, it's going to open it up without any instances. If you have your media menu here, and let's say we go to presets, one of the things that you could do if you want to go to like track presets, you say audio. At this point, you could just double click, and that will automatically add a particular track. So say, okay, I want it track preset that was for, lead vocal. I can now just come over here, just say, okay, I like this one, and just double click, and that will add the track with the track preset. But currently there isn't a way to add a track and have a kind of a default track preset. You could come right here, and if you click on this icon, you could choose track presets. You can say, okay, I want it this particular track preset and load it there. But when you go to just kind of add a track, it'll be empty. You could also right click and choose load track preset and double click and have that add tracks. But if you click right here, you could load with track presets. All right, so we have a question. In which scenario is it best to use 32-bit, 32-bit float, or 64-bit float? So generally, when we're doing 32-bit float, if you have an audio interface that, has 32-bit floating point, like, Rode, and I think Zoom have released some interfaces like for remote recording that have 32-bit floating point, so that, it's basically impossible to clip, then you could use 32-bit floating point. Many people use 32-bit floating point as a default because as you capture, if your audio interface captures 24-bit audio, and we could set this up using our, if we go to our project setup, so we go project menu to project setup or hit shift plus the letter S. So if you're recording at 24-bit resolution, it's probably good to choose 32-bit float, and 32-bit float will allow us to have the original audio that's been recorded and accommodate all of the information that's been introduced through the mixing process, such as EQs and plugins. Now, when 32-bit integer or 64-bit float comes into play is if your audio interface is a 32-bit integer converter. So that way you could capture at full 32-bit, so like Steinberg AXR or URC audio interfaces. And you could do 64-bit floating point if you've now captured all of that information and still want to process. And we have Cubase set up for double precision on the audio engine, which we could set by going to your studio menu to studio setup. And we'll select our audio system, and we could choose our processing precision, and we could choose it to be 64-bit floating point. So 32-bit integer and 64-bit floating point will really only benefit you if you have an actual audio interface where you've captured 32-bit integer audio. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best way to line, say, a MIDI bass with a synth bass and the drums so they all hit in perfect time? Is there a way to quantize multiple tracks at once? All right, so let me see if I have a project that we could show this on. May have something that might work for this. We'll just get this loaded up real quick. Okay, so if you wanted to take two different sources, let me just add an instrument track. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to take these two particular tracks, if you just select the MIDI parts, and let's say, okay, I wanted this to quantize, we can say, okay, let's quantize it to 16th notes. Or if we open up the panel, we could just come over and say, okay, I wanted to adjust the swing. So whatever is selected when I hit quantize, all those different elements will be quantized at once. So it's whatever is selected. So let's say, okay, now I want it to be straight eighth notes instead. Let's do eighth note triplets. So whatever you have selected, they can all be quantized together. And if you wanted to, if you had a particular feel that you liked and you wanted to apply that to other parts, you could just come over here and drag that particular MIDI part directly into an event. And now we could quantize the particular events based on the feel of that one particular part. So we can see now as we do that, the feel from this part can now be applied to the bass. So let me know if that helps, Parabot. All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dude and Agent K on. We see Benny from Sweden. Great to see you. And Cubase Index, we see Jan from Sweden. Thanks for being on. Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Very wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. And we have Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island. Thanks for being on. All right, and we see Val Lou's on. Sending everyone the best greets from Vienna, Austria. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Uses Groove Agent 5. When I cut a MIDI track to make the drums not sound, it keeps sounding about the drums anyway. What could be wrong? Cubase 12 Pro. Okay, so sometimes what this could be is, let's say if we have a MIDI event here. So let's say we have Groove Agent going on. Now, Groove Agent itself can have its own internal sequencer. So if this is playing, I could come over here and let's say I erase these two bars of drums. So what is happening now is both of them are playing at the same time from its internal sequencer. So you think that it should be turning off and we shouldn't hear Groove Agent now. So it could be that you have it set to follow transport, or this is set to play. So make sure that we don't have follow transport or that the play isn't engaged here. Otherwise, it's going to have its own internal sequencer that will be running in sync. So if we see that while that's off, we'll come right here and there'll be no data heard. But if I have follow transport, it's still playing this particular pattern. If we do it now, we actually hear it kind of playing twice. So if I stop, we're only hearing the sequence here. So if I mute an event, so we mute this event, we're not going to hear it. But if I have this playing, then we do hear it. So it could be that the internal sequencer inside of Groove Agent is still playing. That would be my guess, Benny. All right, so we see a question from Dean Garvey Jazz. Hello, Greg. I cannot find the factory presets for Pad Shop 2, even though the library manager shows them as installed, Cubase 12 Pro. So the one thing, if you see it installed, so that's a good sign. But let's go to your media bay, and let's go to Open Media Bay, and you can hit F5 for this, and we're going to go to VST Sound. Scroll down alphabetically, and we'll probably see Pad Shop content. Make sure that it's checked. So we see all of our Pad Shop content. And if you do see it checked, just right click on it and just say rescan disk. And that should find all of the content again. So just go again to Media Bay F5 or Media to Media Bay. Go to your VST sound category, scroll down alphabetically to Pad Shop. Make sure that it is checked here. And if that is checked, then right click and rescan disk, and I think it'll show back up for you. All right, so we see the Not So Sweet. It says glad to make it a live one finally. So we're glad to have you. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, so we have Samuel Sarria from Granada, Spain. I've been to Granada. Thanks for joining us today. And we have HGem77 sending greetings from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. He asks, hi, Greg, happy to be on live. Question, how to remove only plugins from channels with one click? Remove all plugins for selected tracks without affecting channel strip settings. Okay, so let's say if we have, let me just get to an audio track here. We'll open this up. Okay, so I will add some channel strip settings here. And let me add some quick plugins. Okay, so if we are here, so let's see if we could, So I know that you could take each one and kind of just drag it out to get rid of that. But there may be another method for this. Let me see. And let me just look in the lower zone mixer. Maybe try something here. Okay, one method that you could use is, let's say, if I come, let's say, to my inserts. Let's just see if I go to the inserts here, and right, so there's a right click and a clear command. Let's see if we could do that from channel settings. All right, so if we're at the top of the inserts here, you could just right click and let's clear the plugins. So we're going to reset the rack and let's see if that changes our settings. So yeah, so if you're in the lower zone console, you could come right over here and I'll just undo that change and just right click at the top and then just choose clear, and it'll ask you if you want to reset it. And at that point, once you reset it, all of your channel strips aren't affected. Okay, so we have Slims just asking, hi, Brother and Greg, when Cubase 13 released or realized? So, generally we don't announce stuff. I would say it's not imminent, but we generally don't announce stuff before it's available. We think it's kind of an annoying thing to do. But rest assured that, probably a lot of people haven't utilized all the functions in Cubase 12. But, as we get closer to release, as soon as we can talk about it, we will. All right, so you see from Patrick, Greg, if I have routing the audio, can it be panned to wherever I want? I tried, but it sounds like center all the time, even if panned hard left. So let's say if I have this going to a group, so sometimes we see this when it's like a track is routed to like a mono group. So let's say now we have like this drum loop here, and I pan the loop. It still sounds like it's in the center because it's being routed to a mono group. If this was routed to a stereo group, let me just right click and we'll come over here and it's routed to a stereo group. But now as we play and I pan the original source, that it's only going to be in the pan. So make sure that it's not being sent to like a mono group, and that would cause that to be kind of sounding like like the panning doesn't seem to be working. So Patrick asks if I have a cold. So yeah, I have a bit of a cold, getting over it. So my voice may sound a little weird, but I feel fine. Thanks for asking. All right, so we have Noah just saying hi to everyone, and Wilhelm Kampmann from Osnabrück, Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, and Julian from Cape Town, South Africa. So we see question, do track presets include send routing? So track presets will be inserts, channel strips, but it doesn't include the sends. So it may include like the routing. I don't think it includes the routing, but as you're working with it, it's not going to do it. But if you want it to have like a preset configuration that maintained routing to effects. So let's say if I come here and I go to my effects channel and I added a mono delay. So if I wanted to maintain both of those, I wouldn't save it as a track preset. It's going to be a self-contained entity. But if I come and save the particular track and select the effect as well, we can export selected tracks. And we'll just come over here. I'll save it to my desktop. And then when we go to a new project, we'll create empty. So you export selected tracks and we import track archives. And we'll go to our desktop. Here's our March 21st. We'll select all of our tracks. And now as we play, we could have the effects automatically recalled with that. But track presets are just primarily channel strips and inserts. All right, Little Wing Audio is reporting from Prairie Dog Town in Lawton, Oklahoma. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I see from Noah, let's see if I missed any other questions out of context here. Okay, I don't think I did. So it says third will be shimmer. I would like to control all of them at the same time with only one fader, which will be on aux channel. Thank you. So if you wanted to, maybe I missed like the first part of the question. But let me know, like, if it's something like, okay, I have tracks. So let's say if I was here, and I think shimmer is kind of a reverb plugin. And now I wanted to, let's say I have my drums. We'll select all my drum tracks here. And let's say I want to send these to a reverb. All right, so, if we wanted to, control, the aux send on a selected track or selected tracks. So let's say we have our aux send here. So let's say I want to take fader 1 of my MIDI remote. And let's see if we can do this for multiple tracks. I haven't tried. So let's say I want to take this fader, and we'll say selected track. And we'll say send effects, slot 1, level. And say if I select multiple tracks, let's get to the mix console here. Let's see if it controls. It controls one at a time, but whatever. But if you wanted to even just control the level of the effect send, I could come right here, right click, then you can say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. And we'll say this, and now I can apply the mapping for the effect send level. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. I feel like I missed maybe the first part of the question somewhere, Noah. All All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, and he wants everyone to whack the like button. And if you haven't actually, you hit the like button if you learn a new tip or trick. That's always great to do. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. All right, so we see from Sven Isaacson says having a track preset menu in the add tracks window has been on his wish list for a long time as well. So yeah, I'm trying to get maybe even like just a default track list, but you know, you could always just kind of come right over here and access your particular track presets as well. So, but yeah, I've mentioned that to the team before. All right, so we have Edward James checking in from Akron, Ohio. And Michael Teams is already doing virtual ice cream distribution. Thank you for that. My chat field just jumped. All right, so we see from Gary Ward, just says, "Hi Greg, the only time Cubase 12 Pro ever crashes on me is in Score. Going to page view seems to be a problem. Am I doing something wrong?" So, I've had very few kind of crashes in the Score editor, but let me just go to a particular part here that, let's say if we want to go to the Score editor. So say if I just jump to the Score editor, and let's say now that we're in Scores, I want to jump back between edit mode and page mode, that we could just kind of come right over here. So let's say now, and so we'll just kind of switch back and forth. One thing to try that can't hurt is, out of curiosity, depending on if you're on Mac or PC, is maybe try resetting your preferences. So if you hold down Alt-Control-Shift right after starting Cubase on Windows, or Command-Option-Shift, and hold that down and temporarily reset the preferences and see if that makes a difference for the Score behavior. So maybe it's just a preference that had gotten corrupted. But if you have a particular file that's causing a problem, if you want to share it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Okay, so we see a question from Patrick. How to make a number of audio play only through effect track like delay or amp, because if I use sends, it's playing in stereo and effect channel. I want audio to be played only through effect. Is it possible? So, if you have an audio file, let's say if you're doing it on input, so let's say if I come over here, I'll just switch to another project quickly. Okay, like in this case, I have 2 guitars, and both of the rhythm guitars in this are going through. So those are 2 guitar parts, and these are just going all through the guitar. So if you're doing it as inserts, the one thing to make sure, depending on the plugin itself, like if we go to, let's add a plugin such as like a reverb, that realize that if you're doing a plugin like reverb, that a lot of plugins may have a mix percentage. So if you wanted to, if you only want to hear like the process signal, you could just come over and set this to 100%. But a lot of times this may default to 50%. but depending on the plugin, so like this is with my distortion, there isn't a mix percentage. So as soon as I enable this, at that point, but so make sure, and if you're using sends, you're always going to be kind of balancing the dry signal with the affected signal. But if you're using inserts, that would process, and if you're using an insert and you still hear kind of the original source, make sure that you take the mix percentage up to 100%. All right, so we have a question from John. Hello, will 64-bit precision benefit exports from virtual instruments? Will sound be better than exporting 4824 with? Thanks. So it might be just a tiny bit better that maybe a really well-trained mastering engineer might hear, but realize that if you're doing it as a 64-bit resolution file, that there's a lot of programs that won't be able to play it. So it may sound slightly better. It may be very subtle. When I first, and I've told this story many times on the live streams, but when it first came out with 64-bit precision, I have a mastering engineer friend of mine, kind of a legendary guy in the audio industry in the United States named Greg Lukens. And he's a blind mastering engineer, and he used to set up like the live sound systems for Rush, and does stuff setting up systems for the CIA, his kind of magic golden ears. And I just did a kind of a mix down project. I sent one at 32-bit float and 64-bit float, and it was all virtual instruments. And I was like, which one do you like best, A or B? And he picked the 64-bit floating point one almost immediately. And he said, this one just sounds better. I don't know quite why, but this one sounds better. So it may benefit, but you may not notice it if you don't have like really high level precision monitoring. He has Meyer X10s in his mastering room at his house. So if you have $170,000 of speakers, you can hear it pretty well. So theoretically you could benefit from it. It would benefit if you're also running it through different effects that, like reverbs that are capable of doing 64-bit precision processing as well. All right, so we have a question. Is there an auto gain staging, like for instruments, for instance, if I want to set them all to minus 18 as soon as I load them? So there isn't a particular function for that, but it's another thing I've kind of requested along with, the ability to have kind of a default track preset. So, if you load up an audio file, let's say if you have like a channel strip that you're using all the time for a particular control surface, that you could have that. Or when you load up an instrument track, that could be minus 12, minus 18. So there isn't a way to do it currently, but I'll kind of reiterate the request. All right. So we see from Antaeus, hello. Suddenly the mute and solo buttons of my console number 3 have disappeared, and I can't get them to reappear. Someone would have any idea, please? Okay, so let's say if we're on console 3, let me just come to our full. So maybe it is, let's see if we get it to be very small. So okay, so actually, but the letters M and S, so make sure that like your console is a particular height. At a certain point, the letters may disappear with the height. So check the vertical height of the mixer and make sure that there's just a quick setting like that. So as you see, if you make the console taller, the fader part of the console taller, if the letters appear again. All right, so we see from Mike Weiser, question, is there a Steinberg website or specific forum where Cubase fans can recommend ideas for future Cubase updates or versions? So there is, if you go to steinberg.net/forums, there is a kind of a feature request area. You could go there. You could always send feature requests here, and I do a report at the end of the month where, the teams at Steinberg will read through every single question that we send them as well. So, you see Michael Teams doing more ice cream distribution. Thank you. All right, so Little Wing Audio asks, hi Greg, sidechain output versus output sends. I'm trying to get the maximum output gain to the stereo out for mono tracks drums. So if you wanted to get kind of the maximum output for drums, so I would probably just, you can get a lot of gain if you go into like the mix console. So say even if you go to like the mix console here, and let's go to the pre area. So I'll make this just a little bit wider, and let's go to our racks, and we'll make sure that we have the pre rack enabled. And then once we open up the pre rack, you could have an additional 48.2 dB of gain. So say I want to take all of my drums, so at this point, and then we could enable Q-Link. So, or just hold down like Alt or Option plus Shift, and then you could get up to 48 dB of gain right there before it hits any of your channel processing. So maybe just try using the pre-gain and setting that. And that will give you a lot of clean gain directly right there. All right, so we have Parabot 2 just checking in from Australia. Thanks for joining us. Ante says, I don't look very well, so I probably just sound like I just have a cold. So, all right, so Patrick asks, Greg, if I use Cubase Squasher on vocal, I hear too much of noise. Can you show us how to effectively use on vocals? Okay, so let's go ahead and I think we have some vocals here that we could use it on.
I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time. I never promised you I'm gonna stick around. But if you're missing me, let it be. Hit the road, gonna rock, gonna roll.
All right, so we'll start with sorry, hit the wrong button. All right, so let's
I know you're looking good. I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time.
So, I would, so you have kind of up and down compression. So, I mean, like the Vocal Magic seems to work pretty well. So I may start with that as a preset.
I know you're looking good.
And we'll say we'll bypass.
I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time. I never promised you.
But if you're hearing too much noise, it could be kind of maybe the up compression is like kind of raising the noise floor up. So I would maybe try to take the up compression and maybe adjust that down a little bit, but try, like I just started the vocal magic, and let's try warm vocals. And you can see that probably the up isn't so heavily.
I know you're looking good. I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time. I never promised you.
But I think, check your input stage here as well. But, check to make sure that the up isn't set too loud, because that could be raising the noise floor for you. All right, so we see for Michael Teams, Greg, I need to move some notes in an audio track. I know we have seen this before, but bail me out on this, please. So I'm not sure if it's you just need to take, particular notes. So say if I want to take the bass part here. So, we could always just kind of move parts around. And let's say if we wanted to kind of swap these, I could just. Or if you needed to, if it is, sometimes people say, okay, as we need to move notes, we could come over, and if we go to like our VariAudio editor, so you can say, okay, I want to take this particular.
But if you're missing me,
so say, okay, I want to take this note and move it up. And move this one down, and we'll go ahead and just kind of make our bass track louder so we could hear my horrible notes that I've moved.
I got some cheap wine.
So as soon as it comes up to kind of right around here.
I never promised you I'm gonna stick around. But if you're missing me, let it be. I know you look.
So if that's how you needed to move notes, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Michael. All right, so Val Lou asked, question, is there a way to get folders in the Mixer View F3? Thanks, Greg, for your answers in the live stream. So if we're in our mix console, so let's say if I go to my mixer here, when we see the little triangle here, this could be our folder. So if I wanted to only look at the drums, I could just go to my drums and only see those. And if we hold down Shift, I could just hide. So if I wanted to now see all configurations, I could just come over here and say, okay, I want to see all channels, and we'll say show all channels in my mixer. And let's say if I want to hide my input channels, but if I say, okay, I want to see only my guitars, just hold down the Shift key, and then you could just, I want to see only vocals, I want to see only guitars, I want to see only drums and bass. So once you're in the visibility tab, if you have folders in your project, just simply hold down Shift, and you could, and if you wanted to hide, you could just click right there and see particular tracks in your mix console. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay, so we have a question from, says I have trouble that I can't find solution. This is in channel, I put the mic and want to add some plugins. I have the AXR4T interface, but plugin don't work, don't sound, only dry signal. But then I record some song, and then is when the plugins work. I have to restore Cubase, and then everything works perfect. But then I change a previous project, it happens the same. All right, so if you're So, you could use the built-in plugins of the AXR4 interface in direct monitoring. So it sounds like maybe, let me just reread it. Okay, but the plugins, if they don't work, what you need to do is go to your studio menu to studio setup, select your audio interface here, and you need to just disable direct monitoring. And if you disable direct monitoring there, then you'll hear the plugins. So basically the input is going directly to the output, and it bypasses all of the software plugins once you're monitoring through plugins in real time, and it'll play back right after. But again, so if you take off direct monitoring, you could hear the software plugins, but with it enabled, you can hear the actual, you can hear the built-in DSP of the actual effect as well. So just... So again, go to studio menu to studio setup and just make sure that direct monitoring is turned on right there, or turn it off rather. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. Thanks for making it. All right, so we see alternative scores asks, as in the lower zone, there's tabs with mixer, console, etc. Is it possible to have all those tabs together in a separate window? So if you wanted this whole lower zone to be in a separate window, where you could just navigate between the different ones, all of them won't be as a separate window, but each of the individual components can be put into a separate window so that you can kind of move different elements around, but not the whole lower zone as a separate window. So, so each of the different, I think that the chord pads don't, but each of these can be put into their own independent window, but not the collective entity of the lower zones. So if we have like a sampler track, we can just make this into a separate window, but not the entire lower zone into a separate window. Each, 4 out of 5 of these windows can be in separate windows, but not as a collective entity. Wonderful to see Nick on the live stream. Congratulations on winning your prize. Nick is a good example of paying attention to little details can have you win prizes on live streams. All right, so we have a question. When importing audio tracks, Cubase is asking me if I want all audio tracks to be imported to one track or separate tracks. Is there a way to tell Cubase to do automatically the import to different tracks? So I don't think that there is a preference to automatically do that I know of, and we'll just show this for people that just in case they could see it. So let's say if I drag files, so we see we could put it into one track, and let's see if we have a track loaded. Yeah, so we'll see if we want it to be on different tracks or onto a single track. So I don't know of a way to automatically have it automatically go to different tracks by default, but I'll pass that along as like a feature request. But I think a lot of times, there could be times when you go back and forth between them. All right, so we have a question from Wilhelm Kampmann. Hi, Greg. When I use free warp, it always creates unwanted new markers when I try to move an existent marker. All right, so let's say jump over here. So let's look at all right, so say if I go to free warp mode. Okay, so when I use free warp, I always create unwanted new markers when I try to move an existing. So the problem with sometimes dealing with, if we have like, let's say I just want to move this one event. If we don't have a marker kind of afterwards, if I move this event to the left, it'll kind of move all of the other points. So sometimes what you want to do is just to come over here and say, okay, I just want to move this one hit. So you could place kind of an anchor before or after. One other way of doing this is if you have hit points, which will automatically be detected for during the recording process. So let's say if we're looking at our snare part here, that we could select it and say, go to audio and go to real-time processing, and we'll create warp. We could create warp markers, and then once we access it, we can now move the different points without affecting the other ones. So let me know if that's helpful. But, if you don't have, warp markers and, we just want to move this one, it's going to kind of stretch everything. But if we put a kind of a marker before or after, that now we could just kind of put in our warp marker, and those before or after will remain in place. But let me know if I misunderstood the question. All right, so we see from Johnny Lizard, hi, is it possible to save a mix chain of a track or bus? So let's say if I want to, come right over here and I have processing on here. So let's say I'll just put an EQ. That all we would have to do is, as we take this, we could just say, so right click. So let's say if we come like that, you could just, go right click on a particular track and save a track preset, and that will recall everything for you. So try just to right click. So even if it's on like a drum group, right click and save track preset. So if you click in like the meter area, all right, so we see Dean Garvey Jazz found his Pad Shop presets. That's great. All right, so we see question, hi, how can I copy notes in the piano roll by range tool? So in the piano roll, currently the range tool, there is no range tool in the piano roll. But one way that you could help with this to kind of accomplish this, let me just, we'll try this project. Okay, so let's say I just wanted to all right, so let's say I have these notes within the particular, I wanted to copy this, like one measure of these particular notes. And if I come here and I select the events and we duplicate, that it doesn't maintain kind of the space because it's not a range selection tool, it's selecting the objects. What you can do in this case is open up if you hit Control or Command plus letter I and Shift. So Control, Command, Shift plus I. You could go into the range editor. Go into what's called the in-place editor. So I'll just hide this for now. So we could basically have a MIDI editor. So Control, Command, Shift plus I. And now once we have the in-place editor, we could use the range tool here. And let me just not sure why it's not. Okay, I'll just move these over for now. All right, so now let's say I want to take these notes and we'll grab kind of the range selection tool right there. And now we could duplicate and still kind of maintain the same intervallic relationship between. So you have to kind of do it currently in the in-place editor. And you could also open the in-place editor if you right click and go to your track control settings. And we can see edit in place. So that's currently a hidden control. And then we could just say, make it to a visible control. And now you could open this up and back just right by hitting that icon there, or Control, Command plus Shift plus the letter I for in-place editor. Then you could use the range selection tool. All right, so we see Slims just says, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. I think he was getting a tattoo. It says, thank you for the answer. It says, Slims just says, tomorrow I will go make a tattoo of Cubase icon in my hand. I have more than 3 million subscribers in social media, and it's all thanks to your magic software. So it's great. Yeah, send us a picture. We'll be happy to share that if you want. See John Costigan wishing me to get well soon. So I feel fine. It's just my voice is a little rough. But I promise I won't get you sick over the live stream. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Wonderful to see Gerald Elion from Martinez, California. Thanks for being here. Patrick asks, Greg, is there a way to delete double audios? Like in some places, two audios on top of each other accidentally in MIDI. We have delete doubles. So is it available in audio? So if you have like two audio files that are kind of on top of each other, one way to approach this would be just to... All right, so if I have two audio files that are on top, realize that only one audio file is going to sound. So it may not be as critical for this particular function, but the one thing that you can do is if you go to Preferences and go to Editing, there is a Delete Overlaps function. So let's come over here. So now as soon as I would, hover over, we could have the audio automatically deleted. So if I just take this audio clip and I'm hovering over, that could automatically be deleted. But realize that while two MIDI events that overlap can both sound, that there's only going to be one audio event that sounds. So it may not be as pertinent. It may not be as relevant for audio since it's not sounding two different files at once. Wonderful to see Pablo on. So we have the full Hot Mess contingent. Thanks for being on. Everyone's always happy when Pablo is on. And he is Cubasing right now. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Hope you're well. Very interested in upgrading to Halion 7. If I upgrade from Halion 6, will I lose my existing Halion 6 sounds? Thanks. No, so all your sounds would automatically be preserved. Even all of your projects would automatically, that were saved in Halion 6, will automatically, Halion 7 will take over and all the settings will be maintained. So there's no consequences with that. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Greg, if I open channel strips on a track and I want to see channel strips of other tracks, we have an arrow key, but is there a way is always open, it shows channel strip of whatever channel I select, any macros or settings? All right, so if we, so let's come over here. I'll make some different channel strip settings quickly. All right, so as I come here, we could see that we have different channel strips. So as I hit kind of the plus or minus sign, so let's go ahead and I'll leave this to always on top. And then I think if we go to, if I select just a different track here, that my channel settings are automatically preserved. And there could be a preference for this, maybe editors, event editor content files event selection. So see if we uncheck that. So if looks like that maybe just for more of the editors, but so it seems like it does it by default. Let me just check. So maybe this. Right, let's see if I don't have sync selection on. Yeah, so check just to make sure that this preference isn't turned on, Patrick. sync selection in project window and mix console. So once that is on, and now I click on a particular channel, that will automatically update the particular channel. So we'll see that in the rack, reflected in the channel settings. So I don't think you need to make a macro or settings. So try again that preference to sync selection of project window and mix console. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer saying hello from a rainy Mission Viejo, California. All right, Ace Amadeus is saying hi to everyone and says that the Hangouts are so awesome. All right. All right, so we see from John Barry from Old England. With VCA channels in the mixer, what is the meter displaying? So maybe just displaying activity, but let's go ahead and just take a look just to make sure, because it's not actually summing the audio, as we all know. All right, I'll just revert this since I've destroyed it by adding too much reverb. All right, so I'm going to take all these tracks and send them to a VCA. All right, let me just do the routing one more time. Probably messed up. Okay. All right, so let's say if I hide some channels, we just go to visibility here. And let's say I just solo my kick. So it looks like it's kind of almost showing kind of the different activities, like almost like it's not technically summing, but let's see if we add. So the metering appears like it's a group, but again, it's not summing the particular group. So it looks like it is metering all the different sources that are going into it. But again, it's not going to alter the sound other than doing volume adjustments. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee on. All right, so we have a question from Into the Vault. Hello from Oakland, California. How do you switch all sharps to flats in MIDI blocks using Cubase 12 Pro and Mac? Thank you so much. Okay, so it's a little preference, and it's kind of dependent on the chord track. So it may not seem as super intuitive at first, but we'll show you here. Okay, so we'll just look at this. Let me make all the notes just a little taller so we can see. All right, so let's say I want to make these A sharps into B flats, or vice versa. So I'm going to go to my chord track. So let's say I'm in the key of F. So if I just have anything entered in my chord track here, and now if we go to our preferences, and we can see that once we do this, that we'll have our all right. We just all right. So now we can see. We just switch this to. Okay, so let's say we see our key is in F major, and we could just come over here and define the key if we wanted to. So now if we go to preferences, and let's get to, I think it's event display, chords and pitches. Here we can see enharmonics from chord track. So without that selected, so now when I go into my MIDI data, my B flat, my A sharp, my former A sharp notes will now be written as B flat. So if we look at it, so our note description has changed from A sharp to B flat. So you might have to enter in just a scale to work with. And at that point, make sure that that preference under event display, chords and pitches, that you're getting enharmonics from the chord track. All right. All right. You see Nick has to head off to a parents meeting, so good luck with that. All right, we have a question from Mr. Bob. What version of Dorico comes with Nuendo 12? Is there a reason I would need Dorico for Elements? So Dorico is a separate program, so it doesn't come with Nuendo 12. But if Dorico is going to be kind of a notation approach, kind of a traditional notation application approach to doing scoring. While you have scoring in Cubase and Nuendo, obviously. I would often describe it as, if you want to start composing from a sequencer, Cubase or Nuendo is a great choice. If you want to start composing from like a blank staff, where you write the notes in, Dorico is a perfect solution for that. So there is a Dorico SE version, like a starter edition, that is free. So you could maybe download that, and that gives you 2 tracks or 2 staves. And then if you need to do more, you could just simply purchase Dorico separately. But it's a separate program. It doesn't come with Nuendo. All right, so you see from Patrick, says, Greg, send 100% of audio to effects track so that it only heard through effects and not as a separate track, because can't add delay to all track on Ableton. We have effects track. We send 100% so that track only plays through the delay. So it's really, we can have so if we jump back to this project here. So if we wanted all of our tracks to, You know, let's say we'll take these, our drum tracks here. And if we want to, let's say if we have an effects track, we'll just activate it. So I'm just going to add an effects track. We'll say our RoomWorks reverb. Okay. So now I could take these tracks and go to my sends. And now we could send this out. Now I think we could also just select all of my tracks if you wanted to. And let's say, okay, I don't want to use them as sends, but I want to take all these tracks and send it to the reverb. So now all of the tracks are going to the reverb. So if you wanted to send them to a group and put the, and put the insert on the group, you could do that. But this kind of follows a very traditional recording studio paradigm of a console where you could have the effects dedicated to a, particular channel, or they could be shared across multiple channels with effects send, or you could send them all to the effects send channel. Okay, so we see Braxel asks, will Cubase support Dolby Atmos? Yes, since Cubase 12.1, it supports Dolby Atmos. So if you wanted to come, and we'll just open this up here. So if you wanted to move different sources around, and you could now just come right over here to like your ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos. And we could have this kind of, you have a whole setup assistant. And we could have this automatically kind of work in binaural, or if you wanted to work in 714. But you could also monitor in binaural. So yeah, Cubase already has Dolby Atmos support. And also, Patrick, I'll show you one other method that you might, if you wanted to only play through the effect track, another method that you could do for this. So say we only want to hear the effect and not the original source. All right, so let's say we have our guitar. Okay, so what I want to do now is, let's say if I take this as, let's get to our inserts. So I'll take this. Let's make sure I don't have any sends. I'll take off my reverb here. All right, and now I want to come here and let's say I move it to post effect. Let's see, or post fader. Let me just. All right, so I'll do it this way. So let me add. Take this off. And let's say we go back to our send and we turn this on. So now I just send the track to no bus and all we hear is the effect going into the reverb and we don't hear the dry signal. So while we're using an effect send, this is going out of the stereo out the guitar, but if I take that and send the track to no bus, all we hear is the effect. It's 100% of the effect. And then if we wanted to hear it with the source, blend it in. So give that a try and let me know if that's what you're looking for. All right, so a question from Michelle. How do I bring my hi-hats MIDI in the piano roll editor? So let's say if we have I'll just add a instrument track here. And let's make it a Groove Agent SE. Okay, so let's say we want to paint in some F-sharp 1s here. I'll just make this a little louder. Okay, so if you want to do it in the piano roll, like if you wanted to add hi-hats quickly, one way is say, okay, we want to find the particular note. So if you grab the paintbrush tool, and there's different drawing tools that you can have, and you can just grab the paintbrush tool. And let's say I'm going to switch this to 16th notes. I think if you hold down, was it Control? You could just paint in hi-hats just like that. So if you want to just kind of paint in different rhythmic values, but you could also just, the drum editor is also really good for this because now you could just say, I just want to take my hi-hats and put in 16th notes, 8th notes, whatever rhythmic value you want. But you could do that in the piano roll as well. So let's say, okay, let's just make it 16th notes. And find the pitch. So we'll say F-sharp 1, hold down Control, and you could just paint in hi-hats, just like that. So, but the drum editor is really good for that, but let me know if that's helpful, Michelle. All right, hang on. All right, so we have a question. All right, can you show how to save VariAudio changes in an audio track? So I assume it's save. So once we have, just, all right, so let's say we're here and we've now done some VariAudio editing. All right, I'll just get to a different project here quickly. Okay, so once we have everything, all the VariAudio editing that you want, I think we could just go. So let's say if I come and we've made changes. And at that point, see, it's kind of real time. It's adjusting it kind of as it plays, but all you would have to do is just choose flatten under the functions menu here. You'll see flatten real-time processing. That will basically make the changes permanent to the audio file. So once you've done changes under the functions, the second choice will be flatten real-time processing. Let me know if that's helpful. Okay, so you see from Michael Team, sorry, my mistake in the wording. I needed to free warp timing a few piano notes due to my perfectly tidy playing ability. I have the same issue. But really all you have to do, if you have, let me just open up something with audio piano. All right, so say we have. So say I would just want to take like those piano notes here. I'm going to select both of the events, and let's go to our warp tool. So we're going to activate free warp, and what you could do again is just kind of drop in different warp markers, and we could do this several different ways. Let me just again select both events. So I'm going to take both of those and say let's come to an easy way of doing this. If we get audio, is just to create warp markers from hit points, and then as we're in our warp markers, so if I have both events selected, I could just move those as I see fit. So as we come over here and clear my throat, and I just do like warp editing. So make sure that you go to the warp tool and that you have free warp checked. And then once you have kind of your warp markers, then you could freely move. And if you have multiple tracks selected, you could do it just like that as well and totally mess up or correct your tidy piano playing. Make it as good as your guitar playing. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I downloaded Cubase 12, but I can't get sound out of my Mac. Okay, so when we come here, let's go to make sure first of all that you're going, a lot of people I know in Mac will come over and just, say, okay, I set my audio output here to go out of my audio interface, but that's a different driver level. So what you need to do is to go to your studio menu to studio setup and select audio system and choose your audio interface here. And then once your audio interface is chosen, go to your studio to audio connections. And then you could click on either the output tab and see if you hear audio, or if you have the control room at this point, you could right click to add a monitor and choose your audio outputs there to whatever you're hearing. So make sure that you're telling Cubase which audio interface to use, because that's different than what the operating system is using. Those two functions are independent of each other. All right, so we see Braxel says, are all the recording studios going to have to switch to this Atmos system of doing things? Is this the end of stereo as we know it? We thought this like 20 years ago, everyone was going to switch to 5.1. It didn't really happen. I don't see a lot of people personally. I've been over to my neighbor's house who's trying to get his Atmos system to work as he wants it to, and it just doesn't. So a lot of people aren't necessarily listening to Atmos with 12 speakers. It's obviously kind of dynamically allocated. I'm sure Dolby would love everyone to deliver in Dolby Atmos, but there's also Sony 360. There's other delivery formats as well. So there's a lot of studios doing it because they feel that they need to, and labels are requesting it, but I'm not sure if the overall consumer demand is there for immersive audio for listening. So, but we'll see. All right, so we see a question from Ace Amadeus. Hey, hi Greg, does Yamaha have a heavy-duty keyboard stand that is foldable for sporting a heavy DX7 for live shows, or can you recommend one? So I don't think Yamaha makes any hardware stands for keyboards. I have kind of an old Ultimate support, kind of a standard A-frame that I put on my Roland A80 controller on, which is one of the heaviest keyboards of all time, and that works well. Usually the DX7s aren't so heavy, but Yamaha doesn't make one, and I haven't really looked in the market for keyboard stands in a while. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. Glad you could join us. See, Sable just says you sound congested. I hope you're feeling well. So I'm feeling fine, just kind of getting over a cold my son gave me. So the joys of parenthood. See, Michelle, I just see when you're going to answer my questions. It says, wow, I'm getting ignored. So I think I did answer your question earlier, but realize that there could be like a 20 to 30 minute gap from when you ask to when the question actually gets, when I get to it. So all right, so we see from Patrick that my suggestion helped. See, Uno Momento has bad flu, so he came in to press the like button. So hope you feel better soon. All right, so we have VariAudio says, "Hi Greg, on my Windows test machine, the test tone generator seems to be having issues. When selecting brown noise in an empty project, it's crackling permanently. All meters visualizing each crack as well. So it's good to take a look. Let's try it on a new project here. All right, it says add an audio track. I'll just turn my control room volume down. So it doesn't seem to be happening here. So just out of curiosity, see if, if you run it like maybe at a lower buffer size. Let's see if I do it at the lowest buffer size here. Yeah, I don't really have any issues with that, but but see if you get it. Maybe Harry check to see if you get it with all, if you get it with any others, or is it just the particular brown noise that you're getting with? But I know it's on Windows, you said, but it seems to be kind of working here. Maybe someone who's on Windows could check it real quick, see if they have similar results. I'll try it on my Windows Studio machine after the live stream. So we see Michelle ask, what books can I read about Cubase? So probably the best book that's always going to be updated is, if you go to I always just go to the Cubase 12 user manuals, and I tend not to go to the web help version, but if you go to the English PDF version, I think a lot of people used to buy books and videos, and I think, time has kind of passed that by, but here you could see, the whole Cubase manual. I think it's really good. You could also search, so this is kind of like the PDF version of the manual. But you could also, check out CubaseIndex.com, and there's, 25,000 questions. So if you have particular questions, it may have been answered, or come back to future live streams and just ask questions here. All right, so we have a question. When recording MIDI in cycle mode, is it possible to quantize automatically when a song jumps to the left locator position again? All right, so let's give it a shot. All right, so let's say I'll just do a couple measures here, and I'm just going to put on Auto-quantize to start with. All right, so I'm going to activate Auto Q, so AQ here on the transport, and let's say I want my quantize to be set to quarter notes. Okay, so I'm going to just hit record. And let me just put it in loop here. Sorry about that. And make sure we have. right. All right, let me turn up my click volume here. All right, so I'm going to put this into just a quick record. So I'm going to have it set to quantize to quarter notes. All right. All right, so now if we play it, and let's switch layers here. So I just kind of switch to different takes. So if the auto cue, if AQ is activated, it looks like it'll quantize on cycle automatically for you when it goes back to the left locator. So let me know if that works for you, Harry. All right, so we have a question from AK Kov. Is it possible to see MIDI notes as ghost notes from other channels in the MIDI editor? Yeah, let me just show you this real quick. All right, so let's say I want to look at oboe and cello. So I'm just going to open up. I could select both notes here. And then we could just see that this will automatically, I'm going to switch the colors to channel. So I could see kind of both events here. Let me just activate the project. And I'll just zoom in a little. So now we could see if I want to only solo. And then whichever one I select will be the active. So if I wanted to edit my oboe, I could do that. Or if I switch to my cello. So if I wanted to see like all the string parts at once, I could just say, okay, let's grab bass, cello, violin, viola, and then we could, sorry about that, let me just go straight into our score editor. Then I could see that. So that's how you could see, and then you could just come over here and set which part is actively edited right there. See, Michelle says Cubase is the best DAW in the world. My chat field just jumped on me. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we see question, is it possible to delete the last event by keyboard command while recording in cycle mode? So I think cycle mode will always kind of, keep everything. Let me just... But you could always delete the different takes. So let's say if I was... I'll just do new version here. Right, let me just... So it says when recording is it all right, let me just, is it possible to delete the last event by keyboard command when recording in cycle mode? All right, so let's say if I undo, so you might have to, let's say if I just want it, I'll just do one measure here. All right, and let me just check my cycle record mode. So I'm, instead of mixing, I want to, I'll do stacked. All right, so let's see, if I undo, it's gonna kind of undo everything, but not by key command, because it's all kind of, it's actually considered one kind of recording, and it's like that with audio, so but I don't know of a key command to just delete the last very one. So if we, you can select it and just erase it, and you could delete each one using the eraser tool. So that might be a good option, and let's see if this is selected, and I think if I hit backspace, so if it's selected, you can just hit the backspace key and that will delete, but it's contingent on what mode you're in for cycled MIDI recording as well. But try the backspace key. All right, so we have a question. Why does SuperVision spectral curve does not measure at the reference level? 0 dBFS full scale would it be possible to set up? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say. All right, sorry, let me just take out a cycle. All right, so let's get to our spectral curve. So, you can see the minimum and maximum. Usually when I see like a 0 dBFS, it's not necessarily spectral curve. you know, but if it's more with like, you know, the level, you know, here, like I often kind of get this question on, like on the VU meters is where I often get this. And here we could just see the VU at full scale. But usually, you know, for the, so, and you said the spectrum curves, make sure I have it right. So, I mean, this is really just showing the frequency response. So, let me know if it is this actual one that you wanted to see. Or if it was like for more of a level metering. Because that's usually where we see more of the full scale dB. All right, so we see from Michelle, just don't understand step designer. Okay, so let's jump over to a quick project and show a little bit of it. So you can think of it as its own little MIDI sequencer. All right, so let's say we have synth bass here. And we'll just make this a little louder so we can hear. So we go to our MIDI inserts. All right, so let's go ahead and, so often you could just start with, you know, particular presets. All right, so let's say, okay, so let me just come over here. And let's say I have an existing MIDI note. All right, and I just want to cut this. All right, so you could basically use different MIDI notes to go back and forth between. I'm just having kind of brain cramp on this. Let me see if we get this to switch between different presets here. All right, so we have like a pattern here. this way you could just have kind of like your own little pattern that is kind of happening. And if you want to switch between different presets, so let's say we want to go to our synth bass here. So let's go to our step designer, and I'll just go to like the 303 sequence. So now as we play, then I could just play a different pattern. So this way it's just kind of playing like a little micro sequencer inside of Cubase. So it's like, okay, now. And you could have different MIDI CCs here if you want to move patterns around. So that way you could just kind of have like its own little sequencer running, so you don't even have to program notes. You can just kind of draw in different patterns. All right, so we see question, is it possible to see all notes on the piano roll, not just C? So, you know, when we're in, let's say, a piano roll editor, we see the C really as just kind of like a reference point. So, you know, like, so I think, you know, one thing to be aware of is as you are working and we draw notes in, depending on the height itself. So while you see the C here just as a reference to indicate which octave you're in, depending on the zoom, the vertical zoom, that each of the notes can have their own label on the note itself. So we only see, you know, this is an indicator of octave, but if you just kind of zoom in and you could hit shift, like if you don't see the notes, just hit shift H. And at a certain point, you could see the note names actually on the particular notes as well. So I think that if we do this, it might, you know, really the intention is just to give you an indication of the octave that is playing. But let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I align the start of MIDI notes with or without changing their length? Okay, so let's say we're in here, we see MIDI notes. So if you just grab kind of the beginning of the note, we could do that. And if we have this set with snap enabled, so if we hit the letter J, we could have this kind of freely snap and not tied to a particular grid. If snap is turned on by hitting the letter J, it snaps to the quantize value. So if I say, okay, now I want this to snap to eighth notes. If I don't want that, I could just move it by eighth notes. So if I wanted to move notes, and you could also just nudge by holding down Control or Command plus the left and right arrows. And if you wanted to, and just holding down like Alt or Option will allow you to, and so Alt or Option will allow you to move the beginning of the note based on a grid. Or if you hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, we could change, plus the left and right arrows, we can change the length of notes here. So if I just wanted to move notes, you know, Control. So let's say I'll take this note. If I wanted to move this selected note, Control, we'll move it by the snap. If I hold down Alt, I can move the extend the beginning, or Alt or Option plus Shift, I could extend the end, or you could just manually drag it around as well. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston just leaving positive comments for Jazz Dude and myself for making it happen and work so successfully, as well as the amazing Cubase users who support the stream and make it such a positive learning experience. So yeah, it's great. And just happy we could be doing all this after 3 years of COVID. So it's just wonderful. And I want to thank everyone for making it such a great environment. All right, so we see, how do you remove VST instruments from within the VST instrument rack, not the track view? Okay, so if we have different VST instruments here, all you have to do is we'll select one of the instruments. So say this retro log, and we'll see, and then all you have to do is, or I'll just do it in this one so you can see it, just choose no VST instrument, and then it's going to be removed from the rack. So click on the name and choose no VST instrument. So again, click on the instrument name here and no VST instrument. And you could always remove just from the track as well. See Pablo saying hi. All right, so we have PZ136 on as well. All right, Jeweler the Rocket asks, hi Greg, how to align vocals or harmonies in Cubase? I forgot the tool, how to use it properly, thanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and show that. Okay, so say I have background vocals here that I want to align rhythmically. So what I want to do is we'll take, I'm going to just take one of the files, and we have right over here this alignment panel. So click here, and I say, okay, this I want to be the reference track, and I want these tracks to be the targets. So I can select multiple tracks, and now I'll just come and click on Align Audio, and we'll see it visually do its magic. And that's all you'd have to do. So all right, and take a look at some of our questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you actually hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Michael Teens has granted me a gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream, so it's very kind of you. All right. Just let it, so we can see right here, it's all kind of visually aligned. Not sure what's taking a while. This project's acting a little weird. All right. So I think we finally have the beginning of Noah's question that we were missing. So thank you for submitting it. So Noah just asks, So is there a way to use 3 different reverbs that will be controlled by one fader on an aux channel, for example? I have one reverb that is short, the second for long reverb, and the third will be shimmer. I'd like to control all of them at the same time with only one fader will be on aux channel. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let me just find. Let me just look for a particular project. Okay, we'll try it on this. All right, so if you're kind of stacking multiple reverbs, one way to do this is, let's say, okay, we're going to take our vocal here.
Do you recall the day we first met?
So I'm just going to come here and I'll just take off, so we'll make it completely dry.
Do you recall?
So I'm going to add an effects channel track here. So let's say, okay, I want to add a Roomworks. And let's go ahead and make this kind of a, maybe a short room.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school park.
All right, so we have kind of a very short reverb, and let's go ahead and I'm going to go to this effects channel, and we could actually kind of stack different effects on it. So let's go, we're going to select our inserts, and I want to add a different reverb. So let's say a more of a medium room. So we'll come over here and say our LA Studio.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
And let's add a long reverb. Okay, so now.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on
So now
yellow coach.
I could
to
just
ferry
adjust
us home.
this one aux end here,
You looked my way and your heart
and all 3
shone through.
reverbs will be fed.
It caught my breath while you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long.
Now you could also send each of those reverbs, if they're on separate effects channels, to a group channel and just route to a group if you wanted to. So, or again, just when you go to like this effects return channel, this could be your reverb stack with all 3 different reverbs, like your shimmer, your long, and your short. So. Okay, so we have, all right, we have a question. Appreciate all your help, Greg. Is there a way to create a key command that moves selected tracks to the top of the project window? Even better, to move selected tracks into an existing named folder. So let's say I'll just do kind of a larger project here. Okay, so I don't think we can move it into an existing named folder by a key command, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so let's say I want to take these vocals here. I think there is a command to move them to the top. Let me just... Okay, so let's... so I think it might just be a key command. Or let's see if it's maybe under move. All right, let's look under key commands. I think that there might be like a top, but it might be for one track. Okay, home key. So let's give that a try. Or if that just takes me to the top. I'll try it with a smaller project so we can visualize it a little easier. All right, so if I hit the home key, that takes me to the very top track. Now, if you have a divide track list, so let's say if I wanted to take these tracks, I think that there's maybe a key command to move it to the divided track list. Let me just... toggle track list. So if I do that, so let's say I have a divided track list. All right, so let's say so we could just say, okay, I want to take these tracks, and then you'll see toggle track list. So I have, that will move it from this area to the top. So we can say toggle track list, and now it's going to be at the very top. So let me know, and then if you wanted to put that into its own folder, but let's see if there's a keyboard shortcut for that. So it might be under toggle selection, so maybe command plus space. Let's see. And I may have set that. And let me just search for that particular key command. Then you can make and name the track or have the name. Just look again under toggle. Let me see if I just do toggle selection on my MIDI remote, if that's the function. Yeah, so I don't know if there's a keyboard shortcut for it, but see if you could just come over here and toggle track list, and that will put it into the top area if you wanted to. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have a question from Soren. I had my Stream Deck working in Cubase in the past. Now no buttons work. I know it's related to Elgato Stream Deck, but need to ask if you know of something to do. So generally, the Elgato Stream Deck, you need like a MIDI loopback for that to work. So if you hit the button and you don't see any MIDI activity here, that would indicate that the loopback driver for the MIDI isn't set up correctly. So that would probably be it, Soren. So let me know. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, so we have a question from Valu. How to rename multiple tracks at once? Sorry if this has been answered already somewhere. All right, so if we have, you could do it in a Project Logical editor, but it may not be that fast. So we'll just create an empty. Let me just add some audio tracks here. Okay, so I think it's going to be kind of one track name. So if I wanted to come here and say, okay, I want to take selected audio tracks. We'll get to the Project Logical editor. So we can say, okay, I want to transform media type is equal to audio. And then we could say that the property is set to track is selected. And then we could say name. And we could say replace. And at this point, we'll just say Valu. So now I could just hit apply, and that would rename all the tracks at once. Now, what may be faster instead of creating a logical editor preset just for that one particular name is maybe just come over here, copy this, hit the tab key, and paste tab. So let's say I wanted to call this, this one we'll call it Valu Vienna. Hope I spelled it right. All right, so I'm going to copy, hit the tab key, then paste. And then you could do it like that. So the tab key will allow you to immediately go to the next naming field if it's selected. So depending on the scenario, that may be a faster way of doing it. You could do it in a Project Logical editor as well. But using the tab key to, once you have one name field, that could take you down to the next track. And if you just paste, that might be a faster way of doing it. See, Har L. Prusky just says, coming from the days of the past, when such a studio is only a dream for big artists, makes you feel happy. You get such a nice virtual studio and minimal in your hands thanks to Cubase Pro. Amazing. So that's a great point. All right, so we have Bruce Bruton joining us from Simi Valley. Thanks for being on. All right, so we have Michael from Coast Mastering. His question is, hey, Greg, in the channel settings, how can I disable the channel strip and the EQ at the same time? Not one, then the other. Thanks. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say if I have... All right, so I think Michael wants to do this and the EQ. Okay, so let's see. So those are two separate functions. All right, so let me see if there's maybe a key command for this. Okay, so there's a bypass channel strip and a bypass EQ. So let's come over here and create a macro. So we'll do a new macro. Okay, so let's bypass EQs, and we'll see if this works on just one channel. Okay, so let's say if we're on this channel, and let's go to macro. Make sure that they're turned on. Start with. See if this works. Looks like maybe that's global. All right. Yeah, so it might be two different functions. I'll bring that to the attentions to see if there's a way to consolidate those. Let's just see if there's a bypass module. All right, let's see if there's a project logical editor for this. So we could do the EQ bypass. but not the channel strip bypass. And let me just see if there's any. Yeah, so I don't see that for the channel strip here. So we do inserts, EQs, and sends, but not channel strip. Sorry about that, Michael. I'll make sure to pass that along. Hope you're doing well, Michael. All right, so Val Lu just asked, so I can mix Dolby Atmos with my headphones. So yeah, you could do binaural rendering. It's probably not going to be the same experience as if you go to Coast Mastering and work in Michael's room, but it will allow you to work on headphones. So, all right, so we see a question from Eric Ross. So the control room, most people never use it. What exactly is it for? So a lot of people do use it. So I see a lot of people that will have dedicated hardware monitors to switch between speakers. So the control room will allow you to do different monitors. So if you wanted to switch between different speakers, if you're connected to the available inputs and outputs of your project, of your audio interface, you could just switch between the particular presets. You could also, so at this point we could, as soon as we're want to switch speakers, you could go to the control room and just choose to switch between like 4 sets of speakers. You could also do different downmix presets. So if you're listening to stereo, like how will this fold down to mono? You could also have external inputs. So if you wanted to listen to, I have an, like an Amazon Echo or half-inch analog deck or DAT or some other external source, you could listen to that as a reference. You could do your different headphone mixes. Also, what's helpful is if you do have like reverb going on. Like a lot of times when we solo a reverb, it solos the source tracks as well, but if we could have a listen bus, so what we could do here, the reverb is just monitor only the reverb, and we could set different listen. So if we wanted to listen to only, so if I want to listen to this piano, we could solo it, or you could put it in the listen bus. So that way other tracks can be dimmed down. So if we come here. And if you wanted to do processing for individual headphones and cue mixes for people, or let's say you have like a room correction software, kind of like SonarWorks or something like that, you could run those as inserts that don't apply. But, one of the biggest things is you can adjust your monitoring volume without affecting the gain structure of your mix. So once you get into it, it's incredibly powerful and you don't work without it. So it's a wonderful tool. All right, so we see David M. made it quickly on. He's going to be on for about an hour before he has to dash. All right, so reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. All right, we see Jay Hatchie had his computer, his power supply died on him, so I hope it's an easy fix of just getting a new power supply. Sorry that happened. All right, so we have a question. How can I easily create hi-hat rolls as used in trap music? So I don't know trap music very well, but we'll try to make something happen here. All right, so let's say I will just do a quick. All right, so I'm just going to start with the drum editor. Okay, so let's say do like the worst. Just get my drum map from the instrument. All right, so I'll just put this into a quick loop. So let's say all right, so I'll just come over here, duplicate, and all right, so let's say I just wanted to find all right, so let's say if I just wanted to come in here, so if you wanted to put in just like, so I can set my rhythmic value here for 16th notes, and let's say okay, now I want to do 30-second notes to say 30-second note triplets. And let's say, okay, now I just want to put in. So you could just kind of paint in kind of different rhythmic values here. So if you wanted to now just say, okay, well, we're doing this. So you could just kind of choose whatever rhythmic value you wanted. And just kind of switch. So let me know if that is helpful at all. But, you could just kind of choose different rhythmic values. And as you just grab the drum tool, just kind of drag it across. So. Right. Right, reading through different comments. All right, so we have Studio Kaino just saying ciao, Greg. All right, Mark Winslow from Aloha saying aloha from Hawaii. All right, so we see Patrick ask, Greg, if I use RTX noise cancellation, Cubase is not recognizing audio interface. I use M-Audio M-Track, and I hear lots of hiss and mic noise on vocals. Any suggestions? I'm so disturbed I couldn't mix vocals. So generally, you shouldn't have, check to see, your gain structure with your microphone. I know probably the M-Audio M-Track isn't the greatest mic pre's for an interface, but you shouldn't have a lot of hiss recording. So, check your gain structures, like that you're not artificially, that maybe you're adjusting, that the level on the mic pre is set on input correctly. And I'm not familiar with the RTX noise cancellations, as Cubase is not recognizing. So it says if I use RTX noise cancellation, Cubase is not recognizing audio interface. I use M-Audio M-Track, and I hear lots of hiss and noise, mic noise on vocals. Any suggestions? I'm so disturbed I couldn't mix the vocal. So, really check to make sure that you have your gain structure set correctly. You're not trying to boost the mic pre like really high, or if someone is far away. I don't think, you shouldn't have that much noise with the microphone, even with really budget equipment, So I would think that's going to be like a gain structure level. But if you want to send me an example audio-wise, I'd be happy to take a listen to it. You can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so I have a question. I have a question about the sampler. Is it possible to slice audio into several parts and choose which keys to assign different parts to? So it's going to assign it chromatically. But so let's say if we have a drum loop in, so let me just. All right, so let's say if we create a sampler track here, so let's say as we play it. So if you create slices, so we'll activate the slices. So we'll do it by transient. And then at this point, if we take, so let's say, okay, we're going to choose our mode, and we'll say transient. And now we could just drag this as a MIDI event over. So it's going to kind of just do it chromatically, which I think makes the most sense. But, so now we can, as we play up and down chromatically in the sampler track, it'll just do that chromatically. Now, another method that you could use is if you wanted to change the notes easily from the sampler track once it's been created. If you see these three little arrows that go to the right, we could say, let's transfer to Groove Agent SE. And now what that'll do is take the sample, and it's going to map it out to all the different sounds in Groove Agent SE. And then if you click here, we could actually just assign, different pads for each of this, so if we wanted to remap the pitches, we could just, so you want to click on here, and then you could just right click, and then you could choose different MIDI notes if you wanted to learn the MIDI notes, or if you wanted to assign the trigger MIDI note, you could assign it here as well. So while the sampler track will just do chromatically and it will be fixed, if you take it into Groove Agent and then just click right here on the Use Hardware Controller Mapping, then you could remap each of the slices to different pads and different to be triggered from different MIDI notes as you see fit. See Jesse Wolf, and I think this might have been with Ace's question about stands, keyboard stands, the Gator brand stands. Okay, so we see from Jeweler Dorocket a question. Is it a way to lock notes with the piano roll when using VariAudio for vocal? When you scroll up and down, the notes not locked to the piano roll on the left. Why is that? When you scroll, it's moving free. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so we'll just go to VariAudio here. All right. Okay, so do you want to lock notes with the piano? So most of the time when people are doing, VariAudio, they want to actually, hear the changes. They want to be able to move the pitch. Let me just check my control room real quick. Sorry about that. So, I think people, like if, your note was out of tune, that they may, they would like to be able to move the pitch. Let me just, so when you scroll up and down, the notes aren't locked. So, so as if I move the notes visually, I do that. But if I scroll up and down, it's not moving the pitch of the notes. So I'm not sure, if you're, so even using kind of the mouse scroll wheel, the pitches don't change. So let me know if I think I might be misunderstanding. So when you scroll up the notes, are not locked. The piano roll on the left, why is that? When you scroll, it's moving free. So, this way you could just navigate, like if you have a wide range of octaves, or if you just hit Shift plus G or H, you can set kind of the zoom resolution. So if you want it more fine zooming, so this way we could, just move, and you could use like the smart tools to say, I want to take these tools, these particular notes, and lock the pitch and move it closer to the notes. This may have been VariAudioed pretty heavily already. So, but if you wanted to like straighten a curve, you could adjust on a note by note basis. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Jeweler Dorocket. Michael Teams is recommending the OnStage X stand for Ace Amadeus. So you see Jazz Dude doesn't have any problems with the brown noise generator on his systems. Thanks for checking. All right, so PZ1 says the manual, there's a channel that walks you through the manual in detail. That's where I learned about the line tool and how to use it with the scale assistant chord. Haven't seen anybody else do it. So I think I was like when that came out in Cubase 11. So just to see kind of like how the, if you wanted to take like, especially if we're doing kind of harp glissandos. So if we go into our scale here, so let's say we go to our scale assistant, and then we could just choose a particular key. So let's say, okay, I want to be in the key of G, and then we could just come over here and, we can make our own scales if we wanted to. But let's say I wanted to do something like a harp glissando. I could at this point say, okay, I want to do 30-second notes, or sometimes even glissandos will be even a little more free than that. So let's say I will go into like step entry mode, and I will go here. So let's say instead of eighth notes, I'm going to change my quantized tuplets. Let's say to 5, and now I could just go across the keyboard and just kind of draw in glissandos and have them automatically fit and quantize the pitches to the scale if we wanted to. So, but that's a cool thing. Yeah, so reading the manual is always fun. Learn all sorts of great tricks. But if everyone reads the manual, I'll be out of a job. So I don't mind. So we have a question. Hi, does Cubase have a BPM counter to determine the tempo of a track? Right, and right, my chat field just jumped, so let me just find. Okay, so found my spot. Okay. So let's say we want to find a BPM of a track. I'll just jump up to, so I think we have kind of a track that wasn't recorded to a click track. All right, so let's say we'll take this track. If I put my click track on, so if I want to figure out what the BPM of the track is, so if it's like a simple beat or loop, if you go to the project menu, you could go to the tempo detection, and if you wanted to just or before you do that, let's go to project, and you'll see the beat calculator. And if you wanted to just kind of like come right over here, say tap tempo, you could just kind of hit the space bar and type it in to get kind of a sense of what the tempo is, and you could insert that tempo. But if it's like a track that's varying in tempo, I could just come over here. Let's go to my tempo detection and say analyze. And now it's figured out what the tempo is of the file itself. So okay, so you see from Machine Age Voodoo, hi Greg, I have a Wavelab question. Copied preference folder to my laptop to mirror my setup there, but file paths within the program mirror the source computer now. All right, so I'm just seeing, so you copied the preferences folder to your laptop to mirror my setup there, but the paths within the program mirror the source computer now. So did you copy it maybe to like an iCloud or a OneDrive backup? Is that where they were? So, see if it's actually on the local drive and if it's not on a network drive. So usually when I get a question like that, it's still like, looking at files from iCloud or OneDrive from Microsoft, something like that. All right. All right, so David M. asks, how do I make a single note sound when I edit in VariAudio? I don't want to hear the whole track using the play icon. Thanks. Okay, so I'm just going to revert to this project here real quick.
Told her daddy.
All right, let me just make sure my control room was working. All right, I'm just going to check my... All right, so generally what you have to do, and mine is, my control room doesn't seem, let me just check my monitors and my down mix presets are set correctly here.
And our first kiss, there was.
So really what you should be able to do, and my control room's acting a little weird now, but is just make sure that you have, there's like a little speaker icon up here. So if you wanted to just play, you should be able to play directly from there. But make sure that you have this speaker icon just turned on here, and that's the audition feedback, and it should sound, but my control room's acting up for some reason. Let me see if I can figure it out real quick here. But I think, David, if you just make sure that this little speaker icon is on, or just grab the play tool, that you should be able to monitor directly through there. Let me just check my media again here. Let me just turn on and off my control room real quick. Yeah, my control room is acting weird. But yeah, just try that one particular in the VariAudio editor, probably just making sure that this acoustic feedback is turned on. That should help you out, David. See, Bruce Bruton just says, thanks for doing this today, Greg. Sounds like you're under the weather. So I feel fine. It's just my voice is a little different, but I'm not getting anyone sick. So. See, Robert Higgins says, this is my favorite YouTube channel. Thanks, Greg and Jazz Dudes. Thank you for the kind words. All right, so we see from Jeweler to Rocket, is it possible to set up a couple binaural or 5.1 faders when opening a new stereo project, or the whole project has to be binaural when we want just a couple of tracks to be 5.1, let's say. So what you need is a 5.1 output. So make sure when you go to your audio connections that you actually have when you add a bus, that you have let's say a 5.1 bus, and then you need tracks that will be routed to that particular 5.1 bus, and then that will allow you to work. So, but then all the tracks will, if you wanted it to work, if you needed it to actually, if you want everything to go through the 5.1 bus, send everything to the 5.1 bus, and you could have a child bus if you wanted to. So let's say if we're here, you could add maybe just because I don't have, but you could route it to different buses there. So, but if you're doing kind of surround work, have everything go through the surround output. All right, so we see a question from Ryan Clement. How do I set up my headphones? They don't show up in the control room. I'm extremely new to this. So if you... so it could really depend on how your headphones are connected. A lot of times headphones may be connected to your audio interface. And if that's the case, it could be the routing of the audio interface is coupled with the headphone out. So you may turn down the monitoring volume, and the headphones will work on your audio interface. If you have multiple outputs on your audio interface, what you could do, if you have 8 outputs, we could just go to your audio connections and go to control room, and you could add a dedicated headphone output. So say you have outputs 1 and 2 going to speakers, and outputs 3 and 4 routed to go to the headphone outputs. If you're using the control room, you could add a phones channel and just say, okay, this is where outputs 3 and 4 are going to my phones channel. So at this point, we could take the volume down here, and then we could have a separate phones control in our main control room here. So a lot of times it's going to be coupled directly with your particular audio interface, and sometimes it will be coupled where the headphones can be routed and independently of the inputs and outputs of your audio interface. So how it functions with your audio interface could make how that works with your audio interface could be a big part of the functionality. All right, so we see hi, question. Mouse functionality will be changed in next versions of Cubase. So what do you want the mouse functionality to do? There's a lot of people may not want changes, but let me know what exact mouse functions that you don't want to be doing. Okay, so we see from Richard H, 12.052 MIDI remote question. Totally different from previous versions. Is a video on that in the works? Thanks. Yeah, so I already did video, kind of if you look through like walkthrough features of Cubase 12 when it was released from just about a year ago. So you could look at that, and there's some other tutorials coming. But if you have a particular question on what to kind of get set up, just, please feel free to ask, and we'll be happy to show you how it works. All right, so you just see 2 comments from Little Wing Audio, just says phase and oscilloscope. So I know those are like 2 different meters within the SuperVision, but if we wanted to look at them, so let's say as we're going over here, all right, just revert this, but I'll just go to this project. So if you want to see like the phase meter and oscilloscopes, okay, so now if we wanted to open this up, we'll go to our inserts in the control room. So there's a number of different phase. Or if you wanted to see this one as a, let's say, oscilloscope, so we'll come over here. And we could come over here. This is a really helpful one, the multi-correlation. So you can see particular frequencies are out of phase. And if you want to see more of a panorama view as well. Or kind of a phase balance as well. So let me know if that's helpful, or if you another question you had on the meters. Okay, so we see just a suggestion. I can suggest new function for track function selected track to convert on defined percent 10 to 25, 50, 200%. So do you want to convert the length, the view? What do you want to convert to the defined percentage? If you could let me know, I'd be happy to pass it on. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see AJ Soundbites has made the stream. Thanks for joining us. He's just asking how everyone's doing. All right. Michael Team says he's learned a lot today. That's great. See, John Costigan says he built himself a talk box, but it was so loud in his mouth, I never used it much. Yeah, so I remember one time I was at, I think it was XM Radio in DC, and Peter was doing a concert for like the car, for the people that sold the XM satellite radios were through to the car manufacturers, and there's only certain words you could really say effectively with a talk box, and so you're a bunch of car salesmen is hard to say in a talk box apparently. So, but yeah, it can affect your dental work. All right, so you see from Value just asks, is there something like a talkbox effects in Cubase Pro 12? Not currently, but I'll talk to Peter about it, and we'll see if we can get his blessing. See if we can do something for him. Okay, so we have a question from Yanni. How do you create a bus for reverb and send multiple tracks to that one reverb? Okay, so really all you had to do just find a quick project to show this. Okay, so select the tracks here. So hold down the shift key and then right click, go to add track, and then you'll see effects channels to selected track. And now they will all be going over via the send level on each of the tracks. That's all you have to do. So again, select the tracks and add effects channel to selected tracks. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see from Got Your. Do you know what it would take to start mixing in Atmos with Cubase or Nendo just headphones? Is that what we need already in these systems? Is what we need already in these systems? And if so, can you show us how to set it up? So, okay. Okay, so let's say, just do a quick project here. We'll do kind of a setup from scratch. Okay, so first thing you need to be is the project has to be at 48K. So I think here I'm at 44.1. I'll do a quick sample rate conversion. All right, so we need to go to your audio interface, and at this point, we need to go to your audio interface and make sure that the buffer size is set to 512 samples. So we'll close that. And now all you have to do is go to the project menu, and we'll say ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos, and we'll go to the setup wizard, and then we'll say, okay, we want to We'll add our main mix channel with a renderer. We could add to bed and route all the tracks to the bed channel. And now we can say for our down mix, at this point we choose binaural. You want to set your headphone, you go to your preferences. And as we go to the preferences here, we will say, go to control room, and you want to just say use phones channel as preview channel. And now you could start moving different elements around. So if I want to take this piano part, now we go to the panner, and then you could just click on this little button here, and now we can move this piano part. And do kind of all of your panning. We hear our tracks kind of bleeding through in this. So this is kind of your top view. So if you wanted to kind of so we get kind of the piano at the top in the front if we wanted to. So, and then once you're all done with that, then you just go back to your ADM authoring, and then you could just render your ADM file. So you could do it already. All right, so you see from AJ Soundbites, Novation MIDI keyboard to UR22C MIDI in, from UR22C MIDI out to MIDI through box going into Volcas. What I want to do is to have them all listen to the BPM from Cubase. All right, so probably you just have to set the Volcas up in to listen to MIDI clock, and just come directly over here. We want to go to your transport and go to project synchronization setup. You'll see destinations for MIDI clock and set that to like your UR24C. And then at that point, you could just have, so you say, okay, we want my Steinberg UR24C port. And then that way, I think you might have to hit sync to activate external sync. And we can do that in the transport. Then when you hit play, that will send MIDI clock out to your Volcos. And if the Volcos are set to listen to MIDI clock and to follow the MIDI clock, then it will automatically be in sync. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see William Baker says, hey, Greg, hi again from sunny Jamaica, Queens. Did I mention I'm so happy that Cubase 12 works with my Houston controller, the best. So, yeah, I fought hard to get that for them to put that back in. I think it was the version 11. They took it out, and I kind of fought hard, so made a lot of people happy. I know Grant Nicholas, who's on the live streams a lot, also uses his Cubase 12, or his Houston with Cubase 12. All right, so we see question: how can I get the vertical scroll bars to appear in the track versions inspector? More than 7 versions becomes very tricky. Thanks, Andy. Okay, so let's say if I'll just come here and duplicate versions. Do just 1 or 2 more. Okay, so let's say we go to our track versions here. Okay, so it looks like you can. So we have 10 here. All right, so I can see where. Okay, so we could just scroll to navigate. But let's see if we come over to. Yeah, I guess there isn't. All right, so let's see if we do setup. So let's say I'll save this as my default setup, and let's say I only want. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, so even if it's only one visible. Okay, I'll pass that along as kind of a feature suggestion as well. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to ride the like button so we can keep doing these live streams. So yeah, just looking at some of the analytics. So in the last 28 days, we've had 221,000 live stream views. It's kind of crazy. So I appreciate everyone's support. See, SWA asked, bro, can you mix my song? Send it over. I'll mix. I'll take a look at. No, I'll take a stab at mixing your song if I could use it copyright free on live streams. So. David M has to take off. Thanks for joining us. Pablo just says control room is amazing. All right, Little Wing Audio says where's the control room in Cubase Artist 12? So I think it's only in Cubase Pro. So it's one of the differences. All right, great to see Spike Williams on from a Wet Wales. See, Jeff Sabelski says orchestra read through in a Shostakovich chart last night. It's either Russian or Klingon. Probably a combination. All right, so we have a question. Can we select tracks in the mix console and use a command to make any other unselected tracks invisible? Could this be toggled on and off? Would use this to quickly map tracks to my fader port. Okay, so let me go to this project since it says lots of tracks. Okay, so this is what I would try. So let's say if I'm here and I want like these tracks to be visible. If you go to channel visibility settings, and you could just go to the visibility agents and say show only selected tracks. So I'm not sure if that would tie into your controller. Let me just switch my MIDI remote here to mixer. So there is a function for that. So say you show all tracks. All right, but this may not tie directly into. So let's say now we want to go to show only selected tracks. But it still may not tie directly with your controller. You know, some controllers will automatically allow you to kind of map based on hidden tracks. I'm not sure if the PreSonus does. I know like the Yamaha Nuage would automatically do that for you. So, but try that, and you can find the keyboard shortcuts for it under track and channel visibility or channel and track visibility. So let's go to our key commands. Then under channel and track visibility, there's agents for, show all channels, all tracks, or show only selected channels and tracks. So you give that a try. Okay, so we see from Little Wing Audio. Sorry, maybe missed some. Okay, so you see from Little Wing Audio, it says accent the and of 2 and on the beat of 4. So maybe we'll show you how to do this with a quick logical editor. So let's say we'll add an instrument track. Okay, so let's say we want to do accents on the and of 2 and beat 4. So let's go to our logical editor. All right, so on this, let's say I want to, so we're all at like 100. So I want to say we're going to take transform and notes that are going to be equal to, and we're going to say equal to notes, and we're going to choose position, and we're going to choose inside bar range. Okay, and we see this little graphic here. So we'll say the and of 2. And then we're going to insert, and I'm going to choose or position inside bar range. Say not inside range, but inside bar range. And we'll say like around beat 4. Okay, so now, and what we want to do, so we're going to select those particular notes. So if we choose select, I'll just check to make sure our selection's here. Okay, so we'll say, okay, the and of 2 and beat 4. So what do we want to do with those selected notes? Let's say we want to do an accent. So I'm going to choose transform. And we'll say we want to take value 2 of a MIDI note, which is velocity, and I want to add 20. So we're going to add 20 velocity values to notes on the and of 2 and beat 4. So you could just kind of see it mapped out for you there. So once again, transform, type is equal to note, and we want the position to be around beat the and of beat 2, and you could graphically just kind of draw in, or, and this is critical here, or instead of and, you need to change the Boolean condition, or around beat 4. And then that way it would select them all and do that particular function for you. All right, I know we had questions that were mailed in. Let me get to those. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so we see I'm using the latest version of Cubase 12 Pro. Is there a way to set up MIDI remote with a Novation Mark II launch key? I can see the Mark III. Is there a custom script? So yeah, the MIDI remote will work with anything. So there are custom scripts for some different controllers that the controller companies have created. But if you don't see a particular MIDI remote for you, all you would have to do is click on the plus sign. We want to say, okay, we have a Novation. And then we could say, okay, we could add a model. So we would say, okay, we want to do launch key Mark II. Okay, give it the name. You want to just choose whatever MIDI port that you're using for the control. And once you have this done, we're going to create a MIDI control surface. So we want to actually just physically kind of lay out how the knobs will be. So we say, okay, I want this to be just like a fader. So we could come over here and I just can move the fader. And at this point, we could just move different knobs, faders, controls, and that would automatically populate the, so what you want to do is basically say, okay, I have knobs, I have buttons, and we want to basically populate all of the different devices, the knobs and switches on that make your MIDI remote. So you want to basically create a software version so that when you look at your MIDI remote, like this is a Korg Nano control, so that you're making basically a software representation of the functions and layouts on your launch key Mark II. So you could do that. So, there are many devices that automatically work, and you could check with the company that makes the controller, and that's kind of how it's working, is the companies are making these controller scripts. But you can make one, and they're freely available to download as well. So, and another question is my best option to use the remote devices legacy? So you can use the generic remote, but I think once you have this set up, it's much easier to define, and especially assigning different functions. So question 2, I want to change what the knobs of my Novation Mark II launch key trigger in Cubase. What's the best option? I've attempted to use quick controls, learn, but when you touch the knob, the quick control values gets reset to pans. So once you have the layout set up here, just simply double click on the object, and then you'll see like a functions browser. And at this point, you could choose whatever function in a program, and there's thousands of them to choose from, whatever function you want in Cubase to do. Now, if you don't want to see it from a list, you can say, oh, I want this to do my transport right click on it and say pick up for transport control, and then say, oh, that's my stop button. So I want my stop button to do stop, click apply mapping, close out the mapping assistant, and you could have any of the functions assigned. And if you wanted to have your, you could also have like knobs function as focus quick controls. So if I wanted to just quickly go here to my choice sauce. So if you wanted to do quick controls or settings, you could also just have quick controls that could be easily defined for different plugins or different functions in a program. All right, and we see a bit more context with this. I'm setting up Cubase to run live reggae dub mixes. I have stems, then 3 effects tracks, delay, spring reverb, tape echo, and I want all 3 knobs with my Novation launch key to apply the send levels of the 3 effects tracks so I can apply effects to my stems. That's why I want the level stem. So if you wanted to do, so let's say I wanted to control, let's say I had 3 effects channels. So we'll just do this. All right, so let's add, so we'll imagine that these are different effects, okay. And let's say if we have these on our different tracks here, so let's say I'm going to take background vocals here. Let's just select these, and let's say if we add, I'll just quickly come over to our mix console. So I wanted to assign these particular sends to these tracks. So I'll come and say, okay, we're going to have this go out, and I will just put on Q-Link. So let's have these go out to this effect. So that would be like send 1, send 2, and send 3. So once we have our send set up, all we have to do now is I could say, okay, I want to take this fader. So we'll go back to our MIDI remote, and you can do this with anything easily. So we say, okay, this fader, I'm going to move this fader, and I'm going to take the selected channel here. And at this point, we'll go to, I move this, make sure you have the function browser open. And let's go to selected channel and go to send slots, and we'll say slot level and apply mapping. So now I want to go to slot 2. I move fader 2, double click. I move fader 3, double click. And now anytime that I'm on a track and we go to our sends, I have this track selected. We could turn these on. And then on this selected track, I'll just come right over here. I move slider 1, that's controlling. I move slider 3, I move slider 2. This is all being controlled directly from 3 sliders. I go to a different track, I'm controlling that, so you can just do your live reggae dub mix. Okay, so we see in the control room, I have 2 sets of monitors and 1 set of headphones set up. Is there a way to mute the monitors when switching to headphones from the control room? I set up a dummy monitor set to effectively do this by switching the monitor, not connected to anything, but I feel like I may be missing something. So it really depends on your audio interface, but you may just have to, like in your control room, if we have your phones set up, we could have this be completely independent if you wanted to have your phone level set here. But depending on your audio interface, some will allow you to route the headphone outs to a discrete output, and some don't. So, but, consider in the control room setup, so say we get F4, but just routing under the control room, just routing, adding of phones, and then, routing your phones to the different outputs, and then you could just turn this off and turn your phones on for your monitoring. So, or you could just treat it as a third monitor. either way. All right, so we see a question. I'm having trouble getting an object to play through my LFE through Dolby Atmos. Usually I have stereo group tracks going to a 714 bus, and I'll set the 714 group as an object. I'll have my standard bed, but nothing sent to it unless I want to use the LFE. However, that is not working. How can I set up the LFE as a send to add to an object to control it better? So I think that, per how Atmos is set up, is that the objects can't really get sent to the LFE. I think it's only beds that could get sent to the LFE. So I could be mistaken on that, but I think it's only beds that could be routed to the LFE. And it's kind of a design intention by Dolby for Atmos. All right, so we see I have a problem never encountered in any other DAW, Mac user Cubase 12 Pro. I'm recording MIDI on click, and once I open the piano roll, all the events are actually earlier on a grid, like if there was a negative latency. I don't understand why this is happening. Any solutions? Thanks. I saw many people have the same problem. I have the same problem with audio recording too. So I would check first, if you go to your studio setup and go to the audio system, try toggling the adjust for record latency and see if that makes any difference for you. Usually when I've come across this with other people, that would take care of it. So try toggling that. So once again, to go to studio setup and try toggling that. All right, so we see a question. Is there a way to have key commands such as Q-Link and bypass EQ work when the mixer is closed and or the arranger window is selected? So it could really depend. Sometimes, depending on different functions that are shared across different windows may have to have that particular area of focus opened and selected for it to work. Because if you're doing like a quick link, quick link could work for routing. It could work for the mix console. Now, if one of the tricks to make this happen, if you wanted to just toggle back and forth, is if you hit F3, that will always make the mixer the active window. So if you need to do this within the macro, you could do and hit F3. And then there's another key command to make the project window active. I think it's bring to front, which will do the same thing. So sometimes if you work with these key commands, you'll see under project, you'll see bring to front. And that will switch the active status, the active window, to the project window from the mix console. So use those particular keys. Otherwise, I know sometimes people want to leave the mixer closed and do particular functions, but, it really depends on what the active window is. But use the F3 key and the bring to front function to just simply toggle which is the active window. All right, so a question. Greg, I need to forward somebody either MIDI or an XML file for him to open up and print some scores with Finale software. As I've never done that, just to make sure, I wanted to ask you, how would this be possible for my Cubase Pro 12 particular project, please? So to do this, one, you should have them use Dorico. Anyway, but we'll move on. But let's go ahead and... So we could think of, if you wanted to, you could do MIDI files or XMLs, and there's kind of advantages of either one. So if you haven't set up like all of your page layout with how every single part is looking, and you've like tweaked all of your slurs in the notation editor, if you just want to get the MIDI notes over, simply export a MIDI file. So, and you would just come over here and say export MIDI file, and that's pretty standard. Now, if you have set up, like all of your different scores, so that when you're looking at your scores, you can say, okay, I just want it this. And now, like, I have, painstakingly done all the slurs and the layouts and, ever so subtly moved particular notes and say, oh, this is perfect. And I did a slur and I did all of my symbols, and you want to retain and carry over all of the different editing that you've done here. With text fonts and all that information. Then once the score editor is open, you could choose to export as a music XML. You're probably better off, if you haven't done a lot of the page layout, just exporting a MIDI file. So that's probably a little more standard. Okay. All right, so we had a question. I am finding when I bounce stems, there's random bits of silence. Is there any way to stop it? Check to see, if I'm not sure if it's with particular instruments. I have heard of, instruments causing this. I think for a while, some of the East-West instruments would have like little pauses and would have areas of silence. So let me know if you find it on a particular instrument or if it's just an audio file that you're doing the exporting from. But generally it's going to be related maybe to the playback engine of a particular instrument. All right, so we see, and we may have covered this already. It says, I have Cubase Pro 12, and I want to ask, how can I automatically sync a track song with the metronome that goes up and down in BPM? That is, the metronome clicks on the track I'm playing drums for recording. So we'll take a look at this real quick. And we'll jump back to all right, so as we listen to this, let me revert it. So this isn't recorded with a click track. So just a free recording. All right. Okay, now I know what I did. Use my preview channel. I set my preference here. Now my control room is going to work again. All right, so let's all right, so since we're almost done, I'll just switch this real quick. All right, so we turn on the click, and there's no correlation. So if I want to figure out what the tempo of the track is, again, go to my project menu to tempo detection. So here it found the tempo, and we may have pickup notes. It'll create a signature track. So we may see we have a pickup note there. So I'm going to just enable snap and then drop our downbeat. So we say, and now if I want this track to play back perfectly in time, like to a steady tempo, I would go to audio, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. And now I could just type in a steady tempo. So we're about 124, 122. Let's say 122. Now it's playing back a perfectly steady tempo. If I want to be 130, so now so say 108. So that's how you could kind of make steady tempos. All right, let's see if we get one more quick question in before we wrap up. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. We have just about a minute or two left. All right, so we see question, maybe not quite right to ask you those. Is not sure if I did this or not. I use Restream to get the sound out to OBS. Is it possible to get the volume in the control room to control the volume at the same time in OBS? So the only thing, I'm not sure if OBS would do that, but the one thing that you could try doing is just placing the plugin on the inserts of the control room. So that way it's always going to be driven by by the control room volume. So try just to load it. If you don't see the insert area, click on inserts, and then you may have to kind of knock this up by clicking on the main button right there. All right, so you see, just real quick, if I select tracks with shift and toggle them on and off, I would love to select all the tracks I don't want to see and make them invisible. It'd be better the other way around. So what you could do is, if you have a track that's, let's say disabled, you can go to the Project Logical Editor and say, okay, you wanted to take, let's say we want to select tracks. We'll say container type tracks, and then at this point in the post process, choose to disable selected tracks, or hide selected tracks. We can show it on next time, but I know we're out of time, so I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. Thank you so much, and everyone please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back Friday. Goodbye.